Oh yeah.
An outside door, a passageway. Whoop, watch your head. You don't want to bump your head here. A manger. And oh my goodness, here are suitcases. What else am I finding in this spooky spot? Let's check in with Wes and read Matthew 6, verses 19 through 21 for our Bible clue.
Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be.
Well, if you guessed that I was up here in the church's attic, then you are righto. Pat yourself on the back or give yourself a round of applause. You are exactly right. That's where I am. Did you even know that our church has an attic? I mean, they are kind of weird, spooky spaces, right? We have these weird roof lines that we have to watch out for so we don't accidentally bump our head on that or on weird pipes and other things. There are also all these funny floors and attics. There are some places that are strong and firm and it's okay for us to step. And then there's some places that look like floor, but they're actually these really thin boards. And if we stepped on them, boo, we go right through the ceiling of the floor underneath us. So attics are not made for us to live in, right? They're not spaces where we're supposed to hang out and make ourselves comfortable. Instead, they're the spot for our stuff. Those things that we don't need every day, that we want to put somewhere safe. I mean, they're the spot for our long lost treasures, right? Now, this is not my first time in this attic or any attic for that matter. In fact, my family just moved over the last 6 months, and I had to make a couple trips up into my family's attic to clean it out. And there were all sorts of things up there that were kind of surprising. There were old boxes of things that we only get out one season at a time. There were some gifts or things that people made for us that no longer fit in our house, but they were special to us because of somebody else making it for us or giving it to us. So we didn't feel right about giving it away, but we weren't really using it every day either. I mean, we had a lot of things up there in our attic with things that we just didn't have a purpose for anymore, but we weren't quite comfortable giving it another life somewhere or giving it away or throwing it away. So our Bible verses today come from a group of teachings where Jesus was talking to the people that were following him and teaching them how to grow closer to God's heart. And Jesus really talks about a lot of things, like from telling the truth and letting your light shine. But the thing that Jesus talks about the most when he's talking to us and to all those people so long ago about being a follower of God, the thing he talks about the most is about money and things. If I'm really honest with myself, I think one of the reasons that Jesus talks about money and things so much is because we think about money and things so much. Those are the things that distract us, that cloud our vision, that keep us from seeing who we could be and who God's calling us to be as Jesus' disciples. And I think that's the reason that Jesus continues to come back to this topic over and over again to talk to us about our stuff. I suppose when I look at my own heart, I do have a tendency to collect things. I have a tendency to think that if I gather a few more things to me, that it might make me feel differently about the day. Maybe I'll enjoy the day more, or I'll never get bored, or I'll feel more important. I think sometimes all of those things play into my desire to get more. And notice I said get more or want more. It's not that I need more, because what I actually need day to day is a pretty small list, right? But what I want turns out to look a lot more like a Christmas list, a giant wish list. And I'm afraid sometimes those wishes and those wants are never ending. I'm pretty sure I'm not alone about that, because I also have noticed that some people's whole job is to help create that sense of want inside of me, that I want list. And their whole job are to create commercials so that I look at something, I'm like, oh, look how fun this would be if only I had that thing. Or I bet I would feel better about how I've been quarantining if only I was in a bigger house, or if only I had this gadget. All of those things would help me feel better or help me enjoy myself more. And it's somebody's whole job to inspire those feelings inside of me. And that's not bad, because that's their job. But it's my job to pay attention to it and to have control over it. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to talk to us about here. Jesus wants to think about that fire inside, that desire, that want, and wants us to really think about that critically. Because if we just keep feeding that want, does our wish list ever really get smaller? Do the things we want ever really shrink? Do we ever just stop and say, I'm satisfied. I don't need anything more? Have you ever had that happen? I haven't. Because the truth is, the day after Christmas, I start working on my next Christmas list. I start thinking about, what's the next thing that I want? What's the next thing I need? And what Jesus is trying to talk to us about in the passage that we read together is that kind of want will never get filled up. And it will never tell me who I really am and who I'm created to be. So no matter how hard I try to gather all the stuff, no matter how hard how much I fill my attic with stuff, it's never going to be enough, because I'm looking for enough in the wrong place. Where I need to be looking for enough is with God and God alone, not with all these things, but with who God tells me I am. Remember, a few weeks ago we talked about our baptisms, and we talked about how God marks us as God's own, God's beloved, and that we are then a child of God. And that is the thing that can fill us up. That is the thing that can tell us who we are day after day, week after week, so that we don't have to worry about getting all this stuff and worry about what people think about all of our stuff. And we don't have to worry about emptying our attic when we move of all this stuff. But instead, who we are and who we're called to be all comes from inside of us. Who God is calling us to be comes from that understanding that we are God's beloved and that God is really pleased in who we are. So let those waters of baptism just put out those fires of want that are inside your heart. And it's really freeing to let go of the idea that if we had this toy, or we had these clothes, or we had this house, that people might like us more, or we might be more important, or we might feel better about who we are. If we depend on the waters of baptism to tell us who we are instead, we are going to be full. We are going to be whole. And that is the life that Jesus wants for us. That is God's hope for us, is that instead of finding who we are from the outside, we let God's Holy Spirit tell us who we are from the inside. So this week, here's your challenge. And it sounds like an easy one, but I think the more you do it, the more you practice this, the harder it will be. So here's the challenge. Every time you feel that fire of desire kind of lighting up inside of you about something that you want, stop yourself and say a prayer and say, is this something I want, or is this something I need? And the challenge is to be really honest about it, because I think it's easy to say, of course I need it. I need some new clothes because I'm growing out of my old ones. And that could really be true. But do you really need that really fancy pair of tennis shoes when you have really great tennis shoes that fit and work just fine? I think that those kinds of questions can actually shape our hearts to think about who we are and how we spend the gifts that God gives us in a really smart and thoughtful and caring way. Because when we do that, when we use our resources for creating God's heaven on earth, then things will change around us. And I do think there will be more joy. And I do think there'll be more hope and happiness too. All right, friends, we've got one more week of Where in the Church is Miss Eleanor, the spooky edition. So feel free to ask your parents about your attic. I don't know if they'll let you go in it or not, but maybe y'all could talk about that. What are attics for and why do we have them? And maybe wherever I pop up next week will be a great finale to all of our spooky spots at Trinity. So, all right, we'll see you later. Have a great week. Bye.